The night she left, she didn't slam the door. That's what I remember most. No shouting, no broken plates, no dramatic last words. Just the quiet click of the lock and the hum of the refrigerator filling the space where her breathing used to be. I stood in the kitchen with a dish towel in my hand, staring at the spot on the wall where we had once argued about paint colors, and realized I had no idea who I was without her. Her name is Alina. We were together for 9 years, married for 6. I met her when I was 23, broke, and certain I was destined for something bigger than the small logistics job I had just taken. She believed me when I said I would build something of my own. I believed it too. Somewhere along the way, belief turned into routine, and routine turned into resentment. I used to think I was the stable one, the provider, the rational half of the relationship. Alina was emotional, spontaneous, always chasing some new idea. Photography classes, yoga retreats, a brief attempt at starting a handmade jewelry shop online. I rolled my eyes but paid the bills. That was the arrangement, at least in my head. The truth is uglier. I wasn't stable. I was scared. 2 years before she left, I turned down a promotion. It would have meant managing a team in another city. More money, more pressure. I told her I didn't want to uproot our life. She looked at me for a long time and asked, "Or are you just afraid you'll fail?" I laughed it off. I made a joke about corporate slavery. But that question stuck to me like a stain I couldn't wash out. After that, something shifted. She stopped asking about my work. I stopped asking about her projects. We became polite roommates who shared a bed. We still had dinner together, still visited her parents on Sundays, still posted photos on holidays. From the outside, we were fine. Inside, I felt like I was shrinking. The night she left started like any other Tuesday. I came home late. Not because I had to, but because sitting in my car in the parking lot felt easier than walking into our apartment. She was at the kitchen table with her laptop open, a suitcase leaning against the wall behind her. I noticed the suitcase immediately, but my brain refused to process it. "Are you going somewhere?" I asked, as if she might say she was visiting a friend. "Yes," she said. Her voice was steady. "I am." I waited for the punchline. There wasn't one. She closed the laptop and folded her hands together. "I signed a lease. It's not far. I'll send you the address once I move in." My first reaction wasn't sadness. It was irritation. "You signed a lease? Without talking to me?" "I've been talking to you for 2 years," she said quietly. "You just weren't listening." That stung because it was true. I thought providing money was the same as providing presence. I thought coming home every night, even in silence, counted as effort. I thought love was something that could survive on inertia. She told me she felt alone even when I was in the room. That every time she tried to talk about her fears or dreams, I reduced them to practicality. That I treated her like a risk factor instead of a partner. I wanted to argue. I wanted to list every bill I'd paid, every repair I'd handled, every vacation I'd planned. But the words felt thin, transactional, like I was negotiating a contract instead of saving a marriage. "Is there someone else?" I asked. I don't know why that was my instinct. Maybe it was easier to believe she was leaving for another man than to accept she was leaving because of me. "No," she said. "There's just me. And I don't know who I am anymore when I'm with you." That was the first crack in my armor. Because if she didn't know who she was with me, then who was I? We stood there for a long time, neither of us crying. I kept expecting my chest to cave in, but instead I felt hollow. She picked up the suitcase. I didn't try to stop her. Pride, maybe. Or shock. At the door, she turned around. "I don't hate you," she said. "That's the worst part. I just can't keep disappearing." Then she left, and I stayed in that kitchen, holding a dish towel, staring at a life that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. The first week without her felt like an extended power outage. Everything technically worked, but nothing felt alive. I went to work, answered emails, attended meetings, nodded at the right moments. People joked about deadlines and weekend plans. I laughed when expected. Inside, it was silent. Her side of the closet was half empty. She hadn't taken everything, just the essentials. The absence was worse than a clean break. Her winter coat still hung there. A pair of shoes by the door. A mug in the cupboard with a tiny chip on the rim that she refused to throw away because imperfections give things character. I used that mug every morning, even though I hated it. I told no one the first few days. Not my parents. Not my coworkers. It felt temporary, like a fight that would resolve itself if I just waited long enough. I kept expecting my phone to light up with a message from her saying she overreacted. It never did. On Friday, my friend Dimitro called and asked if we were coming over for dinner on Sunday like usual. I froze. We had a routine with them: board games, cheap wine, complaints about work. She's visiting her mom. I lied. The lie slipped out so easily it scared me. That night, I opened a bottle of whiskey I'd been saving for a special occasion. Apparently, losing my wife qualified. I sat on the couch and replayed every argument from the last year. They all followed the same pattern. She would bring up something emotional: feeling stuck, wanting change, missing connection. I would respond with solutions: budgets, schedules, logic. I told myself I was being helpful. In reality, I was dismissing her. The lease papers she had left on the table were still there. I read them 3 times, as if I might find a loophole. Month-to-month contract. Her signature at the bottom. A new address across town. It was real. She hadn't stormed off to a friend's place. She had planned this. On Sunday, I went to Dimitro's alone. I couldn't keep the lie going. His wife noticed immediately. "Where's Alina?" she asked, setting plates on the table. "She moved out," I said. The words felt foreign in my mouth. They both stared at me. "Moved out?" Dimitro repeated. "Yeah, we're taking space." He waited for more, but I didn't have anything else to offer. I expected sympathy, maybe anger on my behalf. Instead, he asked a question I wasn't prepared for. "What happened?" I gave the safe version. "We grew apart." She felt disconnected. "And you?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. That was the first time I admitted it out loud. I didn't know what I felt. I was sad, yes. But beneath that was something else, something raw and uncomfortable. A faint sense of exposure, like someone had peeled back a layer I didn't know existed. The next day at work, my boss called me into his office. He slid a file across the desk. "We're reopening the regional manager position," he said. "You were our top candidate last time." My stomach tightened. The same promotion I'd turned down 2 years earlier. The same city, 2 hours away. More money. More responsibility. "I thought you weren't interested," he added carefully. I thought about the empty apartment. About Alina's words. "I can't keep disappearing." I realized something brutal in that moment. I had built my entire identity around being the reasonable one, the safe one, the man who didn't take risks. I used stability as an excuse to avoid growth. "I'll think about it," I said. That night, I finally called her. It rang 4 times before she picked up. "Hey," she said. Her voice sounded distant, but not cold. "Are you settled in?" I asked. "Mostly." There was a pause. I wanted to ask if she missed me. I wanted to ask if this was permanent. Instead, I said, "I got offered that promotion again." Another silence. Then, "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm not sure who I am without you." She exhaled softly. "That's kind of the point." The line went quiet after that. Not hostile, just honest. When we hung up, I sat in the dark and realized I had spent years defining myself by what I wasn't. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't unstable. But I had no idea what I actually was. For the first time since she left, I felt something sharper than sadness. I felt fear, not of losing her. That had already happened. I was afraid of facing the possibility that she had been right about me all along. I didn't accept the promotion right away. That would have been too easy, like trying to prove something in a single dramatic move. Instead, I started with something smaller and far more uncomfortable. I booked a session with a therapist. Even typing that feels strange. For most of my life, I believed therapy was for people who couldn't handle their own problems. My father used to say, "Real men solve things, they don't talk about them." I carried that sentence like a badge of honor. Now it felt like a weight tied to my ankles. The therapist's office was in a renovated apartment downtown. Neutral walls, a plant in the corner, a bookshelf carefully arranged to look casual. I almost turned around twice before ringing the bell. Her name was Marta. Mid-40s, calm eyes, no visible judgment. She asked why I was there. I opened my mouth and realized I had no prepared speech. "My wife left," I said, "and I think it might be my fault." She didn't react dramatically, just nodded. "Tell me about that." So I did. I talked about the promotion I turned down, about the way Alina would try to start conversations that I redirected into problem-solving mode, about how I always believed I was protecting us from instability. "Protecting who?" Marta asked gently. "Both of us." And did she ask to be protected? That question lingered in the room. I felt defensive. She didn't complain about the stability. She complained about feeling invisible, Marta said. Not accusing, just factual. The word invisible hit harder than anything else. Because I had never raised my voice. I never cheated. I never controlled her finances or told her what to wear. In my mind, I was a good husband. Yet somehow, she felt erased. After the session, I walked for nearly an hour without direction. The city looked different, sharper somehow. I realized I had always viewed relationships like projects. Identify the issue, apply solution, optimize outcome. But people aren't systems. A week later, I visited her new place. I told myself I was just dropping off the rest of her books. In truth, I wanted to see how she looked in a space that wasn't ours. The apartment was small but bright. Plants on the windowsill. A half-assembled bookshelf in the corner. She opened the door wearing an old sweater I'd bought her years ago. For a second, it felt normal. "Come in," she said. There was no hostility between us. Just caution. We sat across from each other at a narrow kitchen table. The distance felt symbolic. "You look okay," I said. "I am okay," she replied. "It's strange, but I'm okay." That hurt in a way I hadn't anticipated. Part of me expected her to be miserable without me. Instead, she seemed lighter. "I started therapy," I blurted out. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "You did?" "Yeah." She studied my face, as if searching for sarcasm. "How is it?" "Uncomfortable," I admitted. "I'm starting to realize I don't actually know what I want. I just know what feels safe." She nodded slowly. "That's honest." There was a softness in her voice I hadn't heard in a long time. Not romantic, just respectful. "I thought if I kept everything stable, we'd be fine," I said. "I thought love meant preventing disaster. And I thought love meant growing," she said quietly. We sat with that difference between us. It wasn't explosive. It was fundamental. Before I left, I asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Is this temporary?" She didn't answer immediately. She looked around her small apartment, at the unfinished bookshelf, the scattered notebooks, the space that was clearly hers. "I don't know," she said finally. "Right now, I need to figure out who I am without adapting to you." On the drive home, I understood something that terrified me. I had never asked myself that same question. I had built my life around being reliable, predictable, necessary. Without her depending on me, what was left? That night, I opened the email about the promotion and read it again. I didn't feel excitement. I felt possibility. And possibility scared me more than loss ever had. For the first time, I began to see that she hadn't just left me. She had stepped out of a version of us that I refused to evolve. And whether we found our way back to each other or not, I was standing at a crossroads I could no longer ignore. I accepted the promotion on a Wednesday morning. There was no dramatic surge of confidence when I sent the email. My hands were actually shaking. It felt less like ambition and more like stepping onto thin ice and hoping it would hold. When my boss called to congratulate me, I forced a steady tone. "I'm ready," I said. I wasn't, but I was tired of hiding behind that excuse. The new role meant relocating within a month. 2 hours away. A different office. A team of 12 people who would report directly to me. For years, I had defined myself as the dependable executor, the man who followed plans created by someone else. Now I was expected to create the plan. That night, I called Alina. "I took it," I said when she answered. There was a pause. "The promotion?" "Yeah." Another silence, but this one felt different. Not heavy, measured. "Why?" she asked. The old version of me would have said something strategic. Career growth, financial stability, long-term benefits. Instead, I told the truth. "Because I'm tired of being afraid." She didn't respond immediately. I could almost hear her thinking. "I'm proud of you," she said finally. Those 4 words hit harder than any argument we'd ever had. We met for coffee a few days later. Neutral territory, a small place halfway between our apartments. It was strange how quickly we'd adapted to separate lives. We no longer reached for each other's hands automatically. We didn't sit on the same side of the table. "You're moving," she said, stirring her cup. "In 3 weeks." She nodded slowly. "That's big." "It is." I watched her carefully, searching for signs of regret. I didn't find any. She looked thoughtful, maybe even a little sad, but not panicked. "I'm not doing this to win you back," I said. "I need to be clear about that." She looked up, surprised. "I'm doing it because I realized I've been shrinking my world to avoid discomfort. And it's not just unfair to you. It's unfair to me." Her eyes softened. "That's the first time I've heard you talk like that." We spoke for almost 2 hours. Not about logistics or bills or furniture. About fear. About how I'd grown up equating emotional expression with weakness. About how she'd slowly started censoring herself because my practicality made her feel irrational. I started doubting my own instincts, she admitted. Every time you minimized something, I told myself I was overreacting. That was hard to hear. I never intended to silence her. But intention didn't erase impact. I'm sorry, I said. Not defensively. Not strategically. Just plainly. I know, she replied. When we left the cafe, we didn't hug. We stood awkwardly for a second before walking in opposite directions. It felt symbolic in a way I couldn't ignore. The weeks before my move were chaotic. Packing, paperwork, training sessions. I threw away more than I expected. Old notebooks filled with half-formed business ideas I never pursued. Clothes I kept for a version of myself I thought I should be. Each discarded item felt like shedding a layer. The first night in the new city, I sat on the floor of my empty apartment eating takeout from the container. No furniture yet. No familiar sounds. Just me and the echo of my own breathing. For the first time in years, there was no one expecting me to be steady. No one measuring my reactions. No one to impress or disappoint. It was terrifying, but it was also clean. A week into the job, I made a mistake. A budgeting oversight that cost the department time and credibility. Old me would have deflected blame or stayed silent, hoping it would fix itself. Instead, I called a meeting. I messed up, I told the team. Here's how we're going to fix it. My voice trembled at first, then steadied. No one attacked me. No one questioned my competence. They focused on solutions. That night, I realized something small but profound. I had always believed vulnerability would collapse my authority. Instead, it strengthened it. I called Alina again. I made a mistake today, I said. And I admitted it. She laughed softly. Who are you? I'm still figuring that out. There was warmth in her voice, but also distance. The kind that comes from two people growing on parallel tracks instead of intertwined ones. As the weeks passed, our calls became less frequent. Not because of anger, because life was filling the space. One evening, after a long day, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked tired, older, but there was something else there too. A kind of solidity I hadn't seen before. I wasn't defined by being her husband anymore. And that realization didn't break me. It steadied me. The first time I didn't reach for my phone to call her, it scared me. It wasn't intentional. I had just finished a late meeting, walked back to my apartment under a sky that threatened rain, and felt something close to pride. The team had pulled off a complicated contract renegotiation. I had led it. Not perfectly, not without doubts, but decisively. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and for a brief second I thought, I should tell Alina. Then I didn't. I set my keys on the counter and realized I wanted to sit with the feeling on my own. Not to prove anything. Not to hear validation. Just to let it exist. That was new. Over the next month, my life began to form a rhythm that didn't revolve around absence. I joined a small gym near the office. I started cooking instead of ordering takeout every night. I reconnected with an old university friend who lived nearby. None of it was dramatic, but each decision felt self-directed instead of reactive. Therapy shifted too. Marta stopped focusing on the breakup and started asking broader questions. What do you value? She asked during one session. Stability, I answered automatically. She raised an eyebrow. I paused. Growth, I added slowly. Honesty, competence, respect, and love, she asked. I hesitated. I think I confused love with usefulness. She let that hang in the air. I had built my identity around being needed, paying bills, fixing problems, anticipating risks. When Alina stopped needing me in that specific way, I felt erased. But now, leading a team, making independent choices, even admitting mistakes, I was discovering a version of myself that didn't rely on someone else's dependency. One evening, she texted me. Can we talk? My heart reacted before my mind did. I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. Sure. We spoke that night. Her voice sounded steady but different. Lighter, but not uncertain. I've been thinking, she said. About us. Okay. I replied carefully. I don't regret leaving, she continued. I need to say that first. The words stung, but I let them. But I also don't regret what we had. I just think we were stuck in roles that didn't fit anymore. I leaned back against the wall, absorbing that. I've changed, I said. Not overnight. But I'm trying to understand myself instead of managing everyone else. I can't hear that, she said softly. There was no accusation in her tone. No longing either. Just recognition. Do you miss me? I asked before I could stop myself. Yes, she said immediately. But I don't miss who I was with you. That sentence could have crushed me a few months ago. Now it felt clarifying. I don't miss who I was either, I admitted. Silence followed, but it wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful. I don't know what this means, she said finally. I'm not asking to get back together. I'm not closing the door either. I just don't want us to pretend we're strangers. I don't want that either, I said. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet and realized something unexpected. I wasn't desperate to fix it. I wasn't scrambling to rebuild what we'd lost. For the first time, I wasn't operating from fear. Weeks passed. Work intensified. I faced another setback. A client withdrew unexpectedly, putting pressure on our quarterly targets. I handled it differently than I would have a year ago. I delegated. I asked for input. I admitted uncertainty. And something strange happened. My team trusted me more. One night, after everyone had left, I stayed in the office alone. I looked out over the city lights and felt a calm I didn't recognize. Not happiness exactly. Not relief. Something steadier. I thought about Alina in her small, bright apartment, probably assembling furniture or planning her next project. I no longer pictured her as someone escaping me. I saw her as someone choosing herself. And I realized I was finally doing the same. When I returned home, I caught my reflection again. The man staring back at me wasn't the safe one or the scared one. He wasn't defined by providing or protecting. He was someone learning, slowly, to stand on his own terms. For the first time since that quiet click of the door months ago, I didn't feel hollow. I felt whole. 3 months after I moved, she came to visit. It wasn't spontaneous. We planned it carefully, almost clinically. She had a workshop in my city for the weekend. I suggested coffee. She agreed. No expectations. No assumptions. When I saw her standing outside the cafe, I felt something familiar rise in my chest. Not desperation. Not panic. Recognition. She looked different. Not physically exactly, but grounded. Like someone who had made peace with her own reflection. You look good, she said as I approached. So do you. We hugged this time. It was brief, careful, but real. We walked through the city afterward. I showed her the office building, the park near my apartment, the small grocery store where the cashier already knew my name. It felt strange introducing her to my life instead of sharing one. You've built something here, she said as we sat on a bench overlooking the river. I have, I replied, and I realized I wasn't saying it to impress her. There was a pause before she spoke again. I started seeing someone, she said. The sentence landed softly but firmly. I felt the initial sting, sharp and instinctive. My jaw tightened before I could control it. But beneath that, there wasn't rage. There wasn't betrayal. There was clarity. Is it serious? I asked. I don't know yet, she admitted. It's new, but it's honest. Honest. That word again. I'm glad you told me, I said, and I meant it. She studied my face, maybe looking for cracks. A year ago, you would have shut down, she said quietly. A year ago, I didn't know how to feel without defending myself. We sat in silence after that. Not because there was nothing to say, but because we both understood what was happening. This wasn't a reunion. It was a reckoning. I loved you, she said eventually. I still care about you deeply. But I think we needed to break to become who we're becoming. Her words didn't feel like rejection. They felt like truth. I loved you too, I replied. But I loved you in the only way I knew how. And that wasn't enough. For the first time, I could admit that without shame. That night, after she returned to her hotel, I walked home alone. The city felt quieter than usual. My phone buzzed once before I reached my building. Thank you for today, she wrote. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Thank you for leaving. I hesitated, then added. I didn't understand it then. I do now. She didn't respond immediately. And that was okay. Upstairs, in my apartment, I poured a glass of water and stood by the window. Months ago, this same view felt like exile. Now it felt chosen. I thought back to the night she left. The hollow silence. The version of me gripping a dish towel like it was an anchor. I barely recognized him. He was afraid of failure. Afraid of change. Afraid of being ordinary without someone to validate him. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not because I had everything figured out. Not because I had replaced her. But because I had finally faced the parts of myself I used to bury under responsibility and routine. The next morning, she sent one more message. I'm proud of who you're becoming. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down and went for a run along the river. The air was cold, sharp in my lungs. My legs burned halfway through, but I didn't stop. I wasn't running from anything. I was moving toward something. And for the first time in my life, that something was me. A year passed before I saw her again. Not because we avoided each other. Life simply expanded. My role at work stabilized. The team grew. I moved into a slightly larger apartment with actual furniture this time, not just a mattress and folded clothes. I kept therapy, not out of crisis, but maintenance. We texted occasionally. Birthdays, holidays, small updates that felt respectful but not intimate. I heard, through her own words, that the man she'd started seeing hadn't lasted. Not dramatically, just incompatibility. She sounded disappointed, but not broken. When she told me she would be in my city again for another workshop, I didn't feel the jolt I once would have. I felt curiosity. We met at the same cafe as before. She looked almost exactly the same, but the tension between us had dissolved. We hugged longer this time. Not romantic. Familiar. You seem settled, she said after a while. I am, I answered. Not finished. Just not fighting myself anymore. She smiled at that. We talked about work. About her photography finally gaining traction. About how she'd started teaching small classes. There was a confidence in her voice I remembered from the earliest days of our relationship. I used to wait for you to approve my plans, she admitted. Even when you didn't say no. I used to think approval was love, I said. There it was again, two people who had once misunderstood each other, now speaking plainly. At some point, the conversation shifted. Do you ever think about us? She asked. Sometimes, I said honestly, but not with regret. She looked relieved. I don't regret us either, she said. We just met each other before we knew ourselves. That sentence landed gently. No drama, no longing, just perspective. I realized then that I wasn't hoping she'd ask to try again. I wasn't bracing for heartbreak either. Whatever we had now was different, not lesser, just complete in its own way. After coffee, we walked by the river, the same path I'd run countless times over the past year. I told her about the first night in the empty apartment, about admitting my mistake to the team, about how terrifying it felt to stand without a role to hide behind. You sound like you respect yourself, she said. I do, I replied. For the first time. She stopped walking and looked at me directly. That's all I ever wanted for you, she said. And in that moment, I understood something fully. She didn't leave to punish me. She didn't leave because she stopped loving me. She left because staying meant both of us would keep shrinking. The quiet click of that door had felt like abandonment. It wasn't. It was an interruption, a forced pause in a life we were sleepwalking through. We stopped at the bridge where the city skyline stretched across the water. The sun was setting, casting long reflections. I'm glad we're not strangers, she said softly. Me too. There was no grand reconciliation. No kiss. No promise of a future together. Just two people who once built a life side by side, now standing on their own foundations. When we said goodbye, it felt final in a different way. Not closed off. Just resolved. That night, I went home and didn't replay the conversation obsessively. I didn't analyze every word. I didn't imagine alternate timelines. I sat on my couch, opened a notebook, and wrote a single sentence. I learned who I was when she left. Not because her absence defined me, but because it removed the excuses. I am not just the provider. Not just the stable one. Not the man who avoids risk to protect love. I am someone who can choose growth over comfort. Someone who can admit fear without surrendering to it. Someone who understands that love is not possession, and stability without evolution is just stagnation. She leaving didn't destroy me. It revealed me. And that revelation hurt. It stripped me down. It forced me to confront the parts of myself I had hidden behind responsibility and routine. But it also gave me something I never had before. Ownership. Of my choices. Of my failures. Of my future. The apartment was quiet that night, just like it had been the evening she walked out. But the silence no longer echoed. It belonged to me.